Okay, we've talked about your ongoing investor journey, but I want to check in on it. What are you finding out now from people that you're talking to that is shaping how you're developing Go, how you're thinking about your market position, where you need to get to financially, all that stuff?
First thing that I'm thinking about is like how to go bigger.
Oh, I feel like you were going really big.
I feel like I had this great plan and I'm like, how do I go bigger? But that forced me to look at the business in a completely different way than I was before, which I think is a great lesson for anyone who's starting a business or has aspirations. And in some ways, it's a parallel path to what I did before when I sold my last business for a couple $100 million. This is a little bit different because it's CPG, but the bottom line is like it's showing how do you show growth potential, but how do you then supply detail in your plan to get there? And it's far different from what I'm doing today than what I did before in terms of like how I'm going to show that. But ultimately, it's the same thing in the sense that next year, here's the growth opportunity or like the TAM or what I think realistically we can hit, and here's the next few years. As you know, I've said in this podcast many times, I'm not like a 5-year plan guy.
Right.
I think 5 years from now, like 5 years ago, I would never have thought I would be doing this, right? So to do this exercise was like a little bit out of my comfort zone because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. But at this point in the game, it's actually a really good exercise to do. It would have been dumb earlier because I didn't even know how the company was going to, I could be making like chips or something now. You know what I mean? Like I had no idea like where we were going. But now that I have an established business, now it's a really good exercise to do.
Did someone put you on to the value of going through the exercise, or did you realize like I've got some gaps in how I'm thinking about the business? I need to, how am I going to close those knowledge gaps? And so you came up with the exercise or the plan.
What I thought about was if someone questions me on how I'm going to get there, I need to have the answers.
Oh, yeah.
Many times, you see this in like Shark Tank, you see it in places where someone will take like an industry stat and they'll say like, well, my fair share is this, so then this is what I'm going to get.
Yeah, I see.
Like an example might be the NA beer market is 1.5% of all alcohol sales, and it's going to go to 2. So theoretically, you can say, well, if it goes up to 2, then I'm going to have 25% more sales. If I'm an investor, I'm like, no, like that's not like a good plan, right? Like to just bank in on what you think the overall economy is going to do and where the interest is going to lie with consumers. So you have to get into the details, which I was like thinking about playing it out. And just like a website, when you want to get information, you want to like double click and then triple click, and then all of a sudden you're down to the most minute stuff. So now I'm thinking about, okay, I have a plan. Now we're working on, you double click it in the plan, and you could double click again, and now you could see to a store level.
Yeah.
Here's how many, in my case, here's how many cases you sell. Here's the average revenue per case, and here's how I can extrapolate that out across all these markets that I'm in today and that I will be in the future.
That seems to be a fundamentally different way to approach how you're thinking about the business. Starting with the big numbers and going, oh, well, I'll get portions of that. You're starting with the really small numbers in some ways and going, how from there am I growing rather than this is what's going to happen and what's my derivative of that.
In using AI and tech, we're able to get this information quickly because once I build a model for like a territory, I can then take that same model and let's call it like a pseudo algorithm to say, okay, the target market that we have, like we know, for example, just to get into specifics of Go, that we do better in markets with a higher income density. So I know that in a market where folks are above $100,000 in income, we're going to actually sell double the amount of cases.
Really?
Yeah.
Compared to 75,000 or 50,000.
Yes, exactly. So then once it hits that 100,000 plus threshold, our case count per store is literally double. And I'm looking at this from historical data across all the chains we're in. So I could look at the chains we're in, I could look at our historical performance, and I could then map to say, okay, here's the U.S. Census data, which U.S. Census has a free API. So I apply that to our sales, and I'm like, oh, very, very clear. Like my hypothesis was this, because if you're drinking non-alcoholic beer, you're not doing it to get fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, obviously. So my hypothesis was like, it's a dispensable income, meaning like you have to have, but it helps you, through all the many, many ways that we talk about and help me in my life. But like, it's not your first line of defense, right? So it's something that you're at the grocery store and it's an and thing. It's not like I have to go there and get this now.
Right.
right? And there's probably other reasons, but the bottom line is like, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is like, we understand it. And now it's pretty easy now to model that out to say like, okay, if we're getting the Northern California market, how many lookalike markets are there? And then you could say, well, in these lookalike markets, I'm going to sell X amount per store versus not. And then you extrapolate that out, right? So then you just model it. But to do that, even a year ago, would have been a crazy amount of work. And now it's like, we already have like a lot of this data. We can do it quickly.
Yeah.
So we're getting in the weeds of like Go. But at my last company, it was not dissimilar in the sense that I looked at the total addressable market of who I was going after. In this case, it was car dealers. I said, okay, there's 18,000 car dealers. The website providers, the best website provider has like 6,000 to 7,000 car dealers, meaning like they have the number one market share. And then it's like the second and third might have had like 3,000 each, and then it just kind of tapered off from there. So collectively, it added up to like covering the entire market, but someone had the lion's share of it. I had a belief that we could be number one, but it was kind of like, okay, I know I can get this number, but how fast can you get it realistically in growth? And then I mapped that out. And as we started to achieve those numbers, the company became more and more valuable. So it was like when I was about to sell it, people came to me. I never even went to market, but I was starting to do research to go to market. And as I was doing that research, I was approached by almost every PE firm that exists that would be relevant to the automotive space.
But so you said you still had then with DI like a detailed level plan of how are we going to get there? I mean, you had an idea of this is the market share we want, or to be number one.
We didn't have the plan that I have today or what I'm doing today at the store level. We could have had a plan that was more detailed, but it was a little bit different because I don't think you can get the same data in the sense of like there was no rhyme or reason why a dealer would choose us outside of like they're a certain manufacturer and we're certified with that manufacturer. So we would do things on a high level to say like, okay, if we get Ford has, X amount of dealers. Let's say if we get our fair share in that program, it's easy to extrapolate that out and say, okay, we're going to do this. Like we got GM, it was huge. It was like 1,000 car dealers.
Got it.
So that's the kind of stuff we do. But in that 1,000, it could be like this rural area and Mississippi, or it could be this urban area in Chicago. Like you couldn't really tell.
Right. So with Go, or maybe we'll say with CPG more broadly, is there a number that you're aiming at in a way, or you feel like you need to get at so that then the plan, I don't want to say is validated, but like...
It makes it worth their while.
Yeah.
Each industry is going to be different. So the automotive space, I knew we had to get X amount of dealers, which equated to, when we sold, we were about $40 million in annualized revenue. I knew people would pay attention to that. Like that was like the number. Like
within that space, that's
you get 3,000 dealers and you're at 40 million revenue. This doesn't include any paid media spend or anything like that. That was another 150 million, but that was a pass through, meaning like any of the spend that we did through Google on behalf of clients and whatnot. So that was the magic number in that industry. I think people need to look at their own industries and figure out what that is. To do that, you have to look at a few things. Who is the potential, let's call it end state acquirers?
Okay.
It's going to always like come to a company, right? You can be acquired by PE, you can be acquired, but those are kind of like along the way. Eventually, a company is going to acquire you or you're going to go public. So you have to play out a bit to say like, okay, well, who's the potential companies that can acquire our company? And that's where the math gets interesting. And in consumer and CPG, especially beer, the companies are massive. They're huge. And you have to think about then, unless it's an acqui-hire situation or something else, like in CPG, you have to get to $100 million in revenue. Okay. And I'm making a general statement to get on the map. So that'd be equivalent to what I was talking about in the auto space at 40 million. Yeah. The reason why that is makes sense if you think about it. These are public companies with billions of dollars in revenue. If they're going to do the work and put in the time to acquire your company, they have to believe that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Well, to be worth hundreds of millions, you have to be worth probably 100 million to be worth hundreds of millions, unless you have some secret sauce and you're doing things differently that maybe they could apply to their companies. And that's one of the things I'm betting on too. So I'm thinking about like the and scenario. Like I'm really leveraging technology to scale this with a very small sales team.
Wait, I want to hold on that for a second because I think that could be really valuable to a lot of people. You're saying that it's not just here is the value of our business from a sales standpoint. Sold 10 million, someone's going to come in, okay, it'll be a multiple of that. I would expect this is what I'll pay you for your company. You're saying there's other, call it assets of the business in terms of how you are doing things that could have a specific value to who's ever buying you based on what their business needs are.
Yeah.
So it's not just our beer, buy our beer, and now that, but you've got a system that they want to take.
That's my
Yeah.
hypothesis. I don't know that to be 100% true. However, I do think in the age of AI and these big companies want to get ahead, if you're doing things that are so unique, that are so different, and they can see your thinking and how you be accretive to them. And that's kind of what Cars.com look at us about. It wasn't just our revenue. It was like our thinking, our innovation. You know, I came in and within a few years, I was the chief innovation officer. I was like an accretive part of these investor meetings now. I was like adding a ton of value. That is my hope in this industry. I don't know it to be true. I haven't done this yet in this industry, but I can't imagine that if we're doubling revenue every single year and we're doing it in a way where they're like, wait, they have 3 salespeople? Like, how are they doing that? And then you're like, wow, maybe I could look at my business and apply some of their thinking and some of their technology, and knowing that it's going to continue to grow and you're acquiring a company that has, let's call it like the brain power to think outside the box, and you could harness that. To me, that's pretty valuable, right? That's beyond just like, oh, you're acquiring this revenue. And the reason why this is so important is because the manufacturing, even though we have the secret sauce here in terms of like that has helped us get to market quicker, it's helped us create an amazing product, which is all critical to sell. The reality is like anyone who would acquire us, our total manufacturing cost for the entire year is like a rounding error to them. You know what I mean? Because it's so small.
Right.
That said, the other thing you want to look at is your gross margin. So on one end, yeah, that's a consideration, but it needs to be sustainable, and you need a bridge to the most profitable products that you can possibly make. And what I mean by that is, let's just say that like our business is, we're $1 billion in revenue, but I'm making a product that is not sustainable. Right? Maybe I'm putting crazy amounts of like adaptogens in it, right? That actually cost way more than the product, and there's nowhere to source them. So like you do diligence, you're like, yeah, it's amazing. You built this amazing brand, but like there's no way that this model works.
Yeah.
So you have to think about that too.
This isn't just we make a better beer than everybody else. We have a better recipe, and that's our value. It's the way that we're making the beer, the way that we're marketing the beer, the way that we're selling the beer, and insert whatever your widget is, product, service, whatever, has a kind of efficiency to it, would you say, that unlocks the real value of the company, not just our beer tastes better than their beer.
And this is the unlock. What is your unfair advantage?
Yeah.
That's what you need to think about it. One of the things I was thinking about recently is like, let's say I have the best investors possible, or the most ideal investors possible in the elevator, and I have like 30 seconds before it hits the floor.
Right.
And it's dead silent. Like I might just be like, hey, I'm Joe, and I created the most efficient beverage company that's ever been created. Like that's my elevator pitch. And it creates enough intrigue to say, well, what does that mean? Well, from a speed to market, from a capital efficiency, from idea to reality, from always improving our gross margin to everything else, from scaling marketing, like we're the most efficient, and I believe that, and we're working toward that, right? So then that, to me, would create enough intrigue to say, like, well, what are you guys doing? Again, though, you need to prove it. So, like, you can't start off like that.
Yeah.
The caveat to all this is if, like, let's say you have the AI scientists that are just, like, incredible, and you're pre-revenue, and you have this amazing product, like, in today's day and age, you can get snapped up in 5 seconds for billions of dollars. So it's all relative. The bottom line is most people listening to this podcast are thinking about, like, how do I even create a business? And then now, how do I make that business valuable? And I think the lesson here is you have to start, first off. Like, again, I would not have mapped this out. Like, the accountant universe, none of that shit would have mattered when we first started. It was like, can we make a product?
Right.
Can I get past that first kind of level of risk that I call it? Like, is this worth even doing?
Yeah.
Do I enjoy it? If you don't enjoy it, you're done. And then once you get past all that and you're at this stage, now it's time to like really get in the details of like, okay, I need to map this out for the future of the company, because it's also incredibly cash intensive. So you need that investor, unless you want to put everything on the line, which I kind of did too. But then on top of that, in order to even be around in 6 months, I need to be thinking about this. I'm not going to be able to prove it or give someone confidence unless I have a detailed plan.
Can you say a little bit more about why efficiency is valuable or important. And what I'm thinking about specifically is you said something before about the software business and getting to $50 million then was critical, right? That's probably a lot harder for anyone in software now, given the way that the macro environment has changed with regards to AI and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the efficiency makes you have to move faster, and you have to move that much faster to get to where you want to be because the market's changing so much. Does that map out in terms of the way you think about this?
I think everything is like a window of time, right? Like a year ago, we never talked about what we're talking about today. We never were in the position that we're talking about like AI and how it's changing. On a high level, we were, but not to the point where it's like, hey, this is like embedded in everything that Go's doing right now, and like our code or all the things that are making us valuable. And I feel like the window of time is not going to be, I'm not going to sit here in 5 years and say the same thing. Now I might be ahead of people constantly. Sure. So you got to be real efficient in terms of like how much can you get done in the shortest amount of time to be able to show that your company and what you're doing is way more valuable than your peers. So that's one part of efficiency. The other part is like capital efficiency. If it takes me or Go less investment to hit a threshold of, let's say, $100 million than previous peers, like that to me is attractive because as an investor, I don't want to be diluted, right? If you're an investor, Dakota, in this company and you contribute $100,000 to Go and I need more investment, well, every time I get more investment, your percentage goes down, right? And if I could do that and preserve like 50% of your investment, that's going to be way more attractive to you because you're not going to be as diluted and the end game is going to be a lot better for you. Yeah. So that's the other thing I think about is like, how can I be capital efficient? And in CPG, it takes a lot to build a brand. Like you're really building a brand. Like that's what you're doing, right? Yeah. How can we build a brand in a very effective way? Like Poppy did a really good job. They were very, very capital efficient. They were like significantly more capital efficient than many of their peers. How do you look at kind of what they did and model some of that to do the same thing? But they didn't own their own manufacturing. We do, so we even have an advantage, at least for speed to market right now. And in beer, I think that's more important than kind of what their product was. So unfortunately for beer, we got to keep innovating. And I always get into like the hardest categories, like, and it make things super complicated. And I don't know why I do this to myself, but like put myself in a position where it's like we can make more gross margin making pop and water because it doesn't even take any time. And we make beer that takes like, 11 to 15 days, like per batch, and it's just like this nuanced thing. All that stuff adds up. But the reality is like you have to look at what you're doing and try to like find your unfair advantage. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. And ours just happens to be efficiency. Maybe your unfair advantage is you have 10 celebrities that are all in. Like George Clooney, his unfair advantage is his audience. Sure. It's not the product. Yeah.
It's his brand and megaphone, right? He's going to draw attention to him.
He's going to draw attention. He's going to be able to get into any store because he's George Clooney. Like for us, it's like we're fighting to get in every store, and our product is going to be a million times better than anything he could ever come up with. But because of his audience, that's his unfair advantage. So what is your unfair advantage? And don't tell me you don't have one. You do have one. Yeah. Whoever you are listening to this, you just have to figure out what that is and double down on it. Your unfair advantage should be like you have a much better product. Like we just won 2 World Beer Cups. Like who does that? Like it's not going to be George Clooney's product. I mean, maybe it will, but like the chances are that it won't be. It's going to be the people that are in this every single day, brewing thousands of times to get things better, and they're so in touch with the product that's our unfair advantage, right? And hopefully consumers appreciate that, and we see that resonating.
Yeah. Setting aside the difference in categories, easier or harder to build your second $100 million business?
I have to take myself back to those times, but I don't remember it being as hard as it is now. And I think part of the difficulty now is before it was easier to scale. I didn't need raw materials. Okay. I literally just had like access points and everything was in the cloud. Yeah. Like my factory's not in the cloud. Raw materials that we used to make the beer on in the cloud. So you have to take so much risk in this space that we've built all this infrastructure, and like what happens if we don't sell it to Kroger or Whole Foods, right? What someone doesn't grab our product and they kick us out of there, what happens? Yeah. It's like a huge risk. The risk is like you pivot on the software you're making. Like you already have the Amazon infrastructure, like you can scale down employees easier. Like so you have manufacturing and then you have sales marketing and then you have everything else that they all have to kind of work together, and it's just putting like all your chips in this thing that like you really can't control. Versus software, I could like be like, hey, let's pivot or let's add this feature today, and tomorrow it's out. Now that said, I'm treating this as much as software as it can be by saying, okay, let's analyze the market. Let's come out with the next beer of the month. Let's then be real efficient of how we're getting that to market. Let's connect all these tools to make sure our costs are in line. Let's hit our customers the right way in terms of making them understand. Let's have a beer club that adds a ton of value. Let's, you know what I mean? And you work close with me on all this stuff to provide as much value as we can to the customers to be real differentiated and almost feel like we're a tech company that happens to make beer. That's our unfair advantage.
Yeah, it is. All right. Thanks, man.